Kong lives.
King Kong Lives was the sequel to King Kong from 1976. It was once again directed by John Gillerman, and this would serve as the last King Kong movie, at least until Peter Jackson came along and rebooted it in 2005. This movie came out in 1996, so we had to wait over 20 years for another King Kong movie. I suck at math, so if my math is off, I'm sorry, but 86, 96, oh 06. So 19 years. We had to wait 19 years for another King Kong movie, people. The end of King Kong 76, well, King Kong died. Beauty and Beast and all of that. But he didn't really die. To quote Poe Dameron, somehow Kong came back and is just barely surviving and is in need of a heart transplant. And so, coincidentally, they find another gigantic gorilla, a female one. And so the heart transplant goes into effect, and well, Mr. Kong and Mrs. Kong try and get it on. I had heard nothing but bad things about this movie, but of course, like all movies I go and see, I went into it with an open mind. After all, going into even the 76 version, it was a bit of a headache because of the rights issues and Dino De Laurentiis wanting to do one, but then Michael Eisner wanting to do another one. It was just a mess. The mess somehow got even worse after the King Kong movie from 76 got released. It was distributed by Paramount. They wanted full rights, but they couldn't really get them because they were being held by Universal, and Dino De Laurentiis wanted them instead, like wanted it all to himself, but Universal didn't want to cough it up. It's a cluster. That is the best way that I can describe it. It's like a three-way dance of sorts for the rights to King Kong. People go into RKO saying, "Can we please have the gorilla?" It just honestly, it makes for a good like movie or TV series in its own right. Even this movie getting made was a little bit in doubt because King Kong 76 was a bit of a financial disappointment. Not an embarrassment per se, but definitely not what De Laurentiis and company really wanted. But with a few twists of the script, they basically made it work, and so King Kong Lives, well, lived. And, well, there's a reason why it's not talked about super often. I think the biggest compliment that I can give to this movie is, by God, they tried. And I know I'm sounding like I'm damning them with faint praise, but I honestly am not. Because from a technical standpoint, I think the movie is very solid. This is the last King Kong movie with a full-on practical Kong suit, or well, a Kong like mechanical suit and effect. From then on, it would be all CGI, but this would be the last time that practical hands were made in use of King Kong. And so I think for that, this movie should be praised because the effects wise still hold up fairly well. When the female Kong is captured, she's being held in this big old steel, not a steel mill, but like a factory, like a repurposed factory. And she's sitting there in this brush, and people are like driving around her and doing their business on the site. And I'm just like, it's really there though. When people actually put time and effort into making this suit look good, it sucks because this movie's kind of mediocre, but the effects look so good at the same time. It feels like they're being kind of wasted here. Another reason why you have probably heard of this movie is the fact that the star of the movie is Linda Hamilton. Yes, that Linda Hamilton, 2 years off of starring in a little movie called The Terminator. 3 or 4 of you might have seen that one. In terms of acting wise, she is the best part of the movie. In terms of the acting, her character was the most interesting because she was the one interested in Kong and going after Kong and trying to save him. I like that. I like the spirit of that. The rest of the characters are borderline like Showa era Godzilla human characters, just bland and boring. I can't even remember the name of the dude who plays Linda Hamilton's colleague slash love interest. I just keep calling him Diet Robert Redford because if you squint like this, he kind of looks like Robert Redford low-key. You could really tell that this story was being held together by bubble gum and scotch tape, and that they were trying to squeeze whatever water they could out of the stone known as King Kong. But they just couldn't. And the movie ended up being a little bit more of a dud than the 76 version. It did make its budget back. It made back about $48 million on its surprisingly $18 million budget. Figure that out. But it was still considered not impressive enough. And King Kong as a franchise basically died a death for about 19 years until Peter Jackson came along and said, "Hey, I've got a ton of money from directing Lord of the Rings. Let me take a crack at King Kong." But as for King Kong Lives, I'm going to give it a forgettable rating. Again, this movie feels it breaks my heart to see such great effects like this kind of being wasted in a movie that just feels like it was being held together by a wing and a prayer. It feels very disposable, with the exception of Linda Hamilton doing her best and some genuinely good effects. I recommend it for the novelty of it being the last King Kong movie of the 20th century, but also at the same time, yeah, you're pretty comfortable skipping this one. Have you seen King Kong Lives? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. And stay tuned for next week where we're going headfirst into the Heisei era of Godzilla. We started it off with the return of Godzilla this week, and next week we're going into it full force. First up with what I'm jokingly calling Godzilla versus Audrey 2 on steroids, Godzilla versus Biollante.